Hi, I'm Niall Joan Rivers, and today we're going to learn about a pretty confusing piece of learning Magic the Gathering, color combos. There are 5 different colors in MTG. Altogether, they are white, blue, black, red, and green. Of course, there are cards that only are one of these colors. We call those monocolored cards. But there are also cards that are any number of these colors. When referring to a pair of colors on any given card, you might hear people say things like, oh, that is a red-black card, or I have a blue-white commander deck. But what you'll more commonly hear is people say things like, that's a Rakdos card, I have an Azorius commander. But what do those words mean? Well, in late September 2005, Magic released a set called Ravnica City of Guilds, which was filled with, you guessed it, guilds. Guilds are socio-political factions that exist in the lore on the city plane of Ravnica. There are 10 different guilds, which make up the 10 different color pairs we see on the Magic color wheel. Each guild has a name, its own unique lore, and unique characteristics that not only dictate how characters within the lore operate, but also how the cards themselves work in a game of Magic. And we're going to cover all of that for all 10 guilds, starting with the Azorius Senate. The Azorius Senate, or Azorius as we'll refer to it, is the blue and white guild. In the lore, they are bureaucrats and lawmakers advocating for blind justice, peace, and the status quo. But mechanically speaking, Azorius is all about control. Controlling what spells you get to cast with cards like Dovin's Veto, a counter spell that can't be countered. Or controlling what creatures get to be on the field with cards like Supreme Verdict, a board wipe which can't be countered, or even controlling what other players are allowed to do on their own turns using cards like the Azorius namesake, Azor the Lawbringer, which prohibits your opponents from casting instant or sorcery spells the turn after it enters the battlefield. So that's Azorius, and next up we have the Cult of Rakdos. Now, Rakdos is the black and red guild, and I am very excited to talk about it because this is probably my favorite of all the color pairs. The only one that really comes close to this in my eyes is the one we're actually going to talk about last, but I love, love, love Rakdos. The Cult of Rakdos is led by an ancient demon named Rakdos. Rakdos sleeps for months to years at a time. But when he is awake, he demands entertainment, or he will instill chaos within the people of Ravnica. And given that he has been around for multiple millennia, it takes quite a bit to entertain him. This has led members of the Cult of Rakdos to extreme forms of entertainment, ranging from hedonism to sadomasochism to bloodlust. Now, mechanically speaking, one of the big things Rakdos loves to do is reward players for sacrificing permanence. And nowhere do we see a better example of this than one of my favorite cards, Mayhem Devil, which says whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. Rakdos is also all about total destruction, which we see in cards like Terminate, which can destroy a creature and keep it from being regenerated. Rakdos cards also are very good at dealing direct damage and making players discard cards, which we see no better example of than in the Magic card Blight, which deals 3 damage to target player, and they have to discard 2 cards. Next up, we are going to talk about the Gruul clan. Now, the Gruul clans, or Gruul, are the red and green guild. The Gruul clans were once responsible for all of the wilds of Ravnica, but as the city grew and grew, it began to grow over, into, and straight through these wilds. This caused the Gruul to decentralize and fracture into a loose association of clans. The Gruul clans are wild, destructive, and violent. Mechanically, Gruul cards are just as ferocious, focusing on overrunning their opponents with strong creature power with cards like Atarka, Worldrender, who is a dragon who not only has flying but also has trample and can give itself or other dragons double strike. Gruul also has a litany of spells that can pump up their boards and wildly cast random spells. This is put on display with the card Violent Outburst, which not only gives a small buff to all of your creatures for the turn, it also has Cascade, which is a mechanic that lets you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a card that costs less mana which you then get to cast for free. The ferocity of Gruul is really put on display with cards like Decimate, destroying everything in their wake. Following that, we have the Selesnya Conclave. The Selesnya Conclave, otherwise known as Selesnya, is the green-white guild. Selesnya is like the hippy-dippy, nature-loving, peace and love spiritual group. They're basically a cult. Mechanically speaking, the thing Selesnya really likes to focus on are making a bunch of small creature tokens and then buffing all their creatures with things like +1/+1 counters. Selesnya excels at assembling a force of creatures who might all be weak on their own but come together to form a formidable force. This is seen in cards like King Darien the 48th. He can not only create creature tokens on his own, but he also makes them all stronger. Then you have cards like Oath of Ajani, which can give every creature you control a +1/+1 counter. These cards and others showcase what Selesnya can do when we work together and brainwash our members just a little bit. Next up, let's take a look at the Orzhov Syndicate. The Orzhov Syndicate is the black and white guild. The Orzhov are kind of like if the Catholic Church, the Mafia, and Casper the Friendly Ghost all fused together into a single guilt-stricken, ghostly, religious crime syndicate. If you owe the Orzhov Syndicate money, do not try to die to get out of it. They will just bring you back to life to collect. In the card game itself, for Orzhov, we see themes of life and death, healing and dealing damage. All of these things are present on everyone's favorite rogue, Asterion, by the way. We see life drain effects all over Orzhov cards, such as Death Grasp, a sorcery that deals X damage to target creature or player and gains you X life, or cards like Debt to the Deathless, which causes each opponent to lose life and you gain life based on how much life everyone lost. These are the main themes of Orzhov, but you'll also see all sorts of flying creatures and exile removal. Now after Orzhov, we have the ISIT League. The ISIT League is the blue-red guild. They are filled with creative and chaotic mages, inventors, and engineers. Members of ISIT are kind of like mad scientists, experimenting and tinkering with machines and powers slightly outside of their control and understanding. In the game itself, we see ISIT drawing a lot of cards, dealing direct damage, creating copies of creatures and other permanents, and just generally taking the reins of chaos into your own hands. Cards like Electrolyze really put on display the direct damage and card draw elements, where creatures like Saheeli show off the guild's copy prowess, and then cards like Invert Polarity bring the chaotic experimentation from the lore into the mechanics of the game itself. Next up, let's talk about the Golgari Swarm. The Golgari Swarm is the black and green guild. They act almost like a hive mind, a group of individual organisms all acting together, fueled by the instincts to simply survive and reproduce. They outweigh all the other guilds in number, partially due to their ability to reanimate their dead into plant zombies. They scavenge, reanimate, grow in power, slowly but inevitably. Mechanically speaking, Golgari interacts with the graveyard a lot. This is illustrated well in Golgari staples such as Grisly Salvage, which can find lands and creatures off the top of your deck, but discards the rest of the cards into your graveyard. Golgari is also good at destroying whatever is in its path. It does this with cards like Assassin's Trophy, which can destroy any permanent an opponent controls. We see the swarm aspect of Golgari in one of my favorite planeswalkers of all time, Grist, the Hunger Tide. Grist fills your graveyard while amassing an army of insects and can ultimately kill your opponents if your graveyard is full of enough creatures. Okay, now let's talk about the Boros Legion. The Boros Legion is the red and white guild. And if the Azorius from earlier are the lawmakers and bureaucrats of Ravnica, the Boros Legion are the cops. They are an aggressive, law-enforcing military force who wield flaming swords and have legions of angels in their ranks. Mechanically speaking, Boros excels in combat, often incentivizing players to attack by giving their creatures powerful keywords while they're attacking, like Indestructible, Menace, or even Double Strike. A great example of this is Aorus, God of Victory. which gives all of your attacking creatures menace and prevents damage that would be dealt. Boros is also good at dealing direct damage and healing, and nowhere is this on better display than in the Boros staple card, Lightning Helix, which deals 3 damage to any target and heals you for 3. With 2 left to go, let's take a look at the Simic Combine. The Simic Combine is the green and blue guild. It is made up of a lot of Ravnica's doctors and physicians, but they are known for some unorthodox practice. Namely, Simic doctors are known for combining organisms in strange ways and making twisted mutations. They are all about preserving nature and life and experimenting with how that can take form. On the actual cards, we see a lot of mana ramping and card draw, which perhaps we see the most in this classic Simic card, Growth Spiral, which allows you to draw a card and play an additional land card. Simic also loves to alter or mutate creatures on the battlefield, shown in this card, Biomass Mutation, which can change the base level stats of your creatures to be much bigger than they usually are. Or in cards like Aether Mutation, which can get rid of your opponent's creatures and leave you with a small pile of creature tokens left in their wake. That's 9 out of 10 done. Last but not least, we have House Dimir. House Dimir is the blue-black guild, and it's last on our list for a reason. In the lore, Dimir is a shadowy organization of secrecy and subterfuge. Filled with spies and thieves and all sorts of shadowy fellows, the Dimir guild was originally kept secret from the public. So historically, people on Ravnica thought there were only 9 guilds total. Now eventually, Dimir's existence would come to light, and people would start calling it the 10th guild, which is why we made it 10th on our list. Mechanically speaking, we see a lot of sneaky subterfuge in Dimir's card design. Cards like Lockmere Serpent, which can make itself unblockable, and also has an ability which lets us draw cards, another staple in Dimir colors. Dimir is also known for milling opponents and making use of the cards put into their graveyard. This is best shown on the card Drown in the Loch, which can either counter a spell or destroy a creature as long as the opponent's graveyard is full enough. So that's it. That's all 10 guilds. Those are all 10 of the color pairs in Magic. Now you know if someone says they have an ISIT deck, an Orzhov deck, anything like that, you'll understand. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments what your favorite guild is, either based on the lore or the cards or what decks you like to play. And if there's any other new player information you would like me to cover, let me know. As always, thank you to supporters on Patreon, which you can find a link to in the description below, anyone who's subscribed here on YouTube, and also to our sponsor HeavyPlay. You can get 10% off your order at heavyplay.com by using code NILE at checkout. All right, bye. LOL, lots of love.